Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for picking this session, for joining us. This is going to be really, really informal. Rather than make you guys have to wait till the very last slide to ask your questions and risk losing what you guys have to ask, feel free to ask questions during the entire presentation. After a single or two slides, go ahead and ask away, and I'd be happy to address things piece by piece. So, my name is Ed Kim. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for WowRack Technologies. We are a global solutions hybrid cloud company, and I'll go into that really in brief. Today's topic is really discussing cloud security. I mean, everyone knows that early cloud adoption was probably the biggest barrier to migration to the cloud, but today it's really cloud security. Now people are trying to figure out, I know how to deploy for the most part, how do I mitigate risk and lessen security contingencies within my network, whether it be different workloads, whether it be corporate network, things like that. So we'll be talking about issues, compliancy, and the different deployment methods. So real quick, who we are. So WowRack is an agnostic global cloud company. If you were to label us into one word, we are an IaaS, an infrastructure as a service company. We really just leverage all the most common hosting models and really mirror it into a true hybridization of technologies to really provide the best value and the best delivery model for hosting for our clients. We started in 2001. We host a lot of startups, high traffic web companies, a lot of publicly traded firms. So really, and I hate to say cliches because I don't really like using too much, but we do host just a real big gambit and a wide variety of different type of clientele. We have about 4,000 clients roughly worldwide, and we have data centers in a global map that I'll show you here in a second. We do have accredited data centers which are compliant, so it meets and is able to host all the different acronyms that you guys have heard of. So SSA 16 and SOC 1 compliance is just basically, in layman's terms, allows us to have audited processes showing that we actually have redundancies in place for our data center. So it's very general for any hosting company that you use, but it is very important for you guys to see whoever you use to use a company that has those type of accreditations. We're hypervisor agnostic, meaning we do mostly Hyper-V and VMware. But there are clients who prefer Zen, there are clients that prefer Virtuoso or OpenVZ. So we're really agnostic in the sense that if a client says, Ed, I don't know what the heck I need to use, you need to show me which one. And we'll architect it, whiteboard it, and deploy it for the client. If a client says, I'm just used to VMware, would you mind deploying that hypervisor? Not a problem. So it really just depends on the needs of the customer. We are a Microsoft and Linux shop. We wouldn't be an agnostic hosting company if we didn't provide both back-end infrastructure. So we do both, open source and closed source Microsoft. And we are an MSP and CSP. Those are probably terms that you three have heard quite a bit. So we are a cloud solutions provider as well as a managed services company. Contrary to what you might hear from other people, my motto is one size cloud doesn't fit all. And it just really depends on the type of needs that your customer has or your business has. It really depends on the data requirements, where your customers are and where they reside. There are a lot of different factors that really dictate the type of cloud that you're supposed to use. WowRack, I'm not here to sell it, but just to show you the facts. We are a one-stop shop hosting company. We do provide co-location, so this is the old school legacy environment. Most companies do it. Power pipe and ping, where people own their own gear and we house it. And we do public cloud solutions, so very similar to, instead of monthly recurring invoices or charges, then we charge on an hourly basis, very similar to the market leader AWS. So it's multi-tenant infrastructure where you can spin up and spin down instances. You guys are probably commonplace to know that. So private cloud infrastructure is the third area of hosting that we focus on, and this is probably our core bread and butter and our expertise. Private cloud, in short, just takes the single tenant environment and virtualizes it. So virtualization and hypervisors is what makes the cloud what it is, including data centers and power. How you actually deploy your data into which cloud really makes a difference on how you actually mitigate security protocols. So private cloud is really our bread and butter in designing customized bare metal infrastructure on virtualization platforms and managing it as a single tenant environment. So think of it as an apartment building. Instead of having people next to you that you don't know, that's public cloud, because it's multi-tenant and you're sharing the building with people you don't know. But think of private cloud as the same scenario, but you have family and people you trust next door to you. So the security and the I/O and the caching and the memory is a bit higher when it comes to a private cloud infrastructure. And we also do something called corporate cloud. So outside of the standard workloads of applications, batch, transactional analytics, probably database is the biggest workload. We also do hosting for Host Exchange or SharePoint. We do hosted VDI, desktop as a service. So we really take the corporate data off-prem and put it into a more private cloud infrastructure. It's very similar to Office 365. Office 365 is a fantastic product, but the difference is it's on Azure. So it's a multi-tenant environment where you spin down and spin up instances. Here you actually have a private, more secure environment for people that maybe have a higher relevance on controlling their email. If they have certain data that they have that needs to be more controlled, a private cloud tends to be a better fit for that. But really, all three of these deployment models are key to any solution. You just got to figure out which one best suits your business needs. We are a global data center, so in short, we are located in Seattle, Washington. So that's our headquarters since 2001. We have 2 data centers there. We also have a DR site in Chicago, Dallas, and we have a secondary headquarters in Indonesia, namely Jakarta and Surabaya. Those are the 2 largest cities. My partners are Indonesian. That's the whole reason why we have a presence out there. And we also have Singapore and Hong Kong. And that really today makes up our global presence. Not nearly the size of Amazon Web Services, but this is a good start for us. These are a sample of our clients. You know, we have aerospace, we have analytics, sports, nonprofit, media, finance, R&D companies, even nonprofits, social media, search engine companies, wiki companies, language learning. LiveMocha just got acquired by Rosetta Stones, and some other publicly traded companies. So we have a decent list of clients that we work with. So real quick, I'm not going to bore you too much with stats and trends. I only have 1 slide with numbers because I want to make this a little bit more interactive and something that you guys can actually take home and remember. But a couple things, and this is an order of least to greatest in terms of cloud inhibitors. What are some of the greatest things in general that deter people from migrating to the cloud? You know, complexity is still a factor. Some people, they just don't understand how to utilize cloud because it's very abstract. There's so many different delivery models on top of deployment models. They don't understand really the differences still to this day. I go into a lot of consulting meetings and people still are trying to understand the difference between public and private cloud. So it really leads to the complexity aspect and why some people don't deploy still today into the cloud. Reliability, I think I found personally this is contingent on budget too. If you have a single environment or a high availability environment where you have dual on pairs on each of your network points, but everyone needs to plan for DR, a disaster recovery strategy. Everyone needs to be able to have a backup plan, especially if you're dealing with very highly compliant data, or if you're dealing with any of the acronyms we're going to go into, like the finance, the publicly traded companies, medical records, credit card transactions, government data, things like that. So compliance is a big thing there. Vendor lock-in, so this is a big thing that you guys have probably heard throughout the sessions. Basically, one of the key inhibitors of people going into the cloud, the second to the most, is people are afraid that once they get in, they can't get out. And there's truth to that, and that's why hybridization is such a big key to me personally, from what I've seen in the industry, has helped companies, I think, offset that inhibition to migrate to the cloud. They also call it interoperability, the inability to move between one cloud to another. So hybridization has really defeated that concern. But number one, security is the biggest thing. And it's probably the biggest inhibitor and roadblock to cloud migration today. So really quick, by the numbers, cloud, as you guys know, is a big growing force. According to Forbes, InfoWorld, 451 Research, and Gartner, about 69% of enterprises will increase their spending in 2014. Increasing spending is not a surprise, but it's a decent number, almost 70%. Almost $4 trillion in overall IT spending in 2014. A lot of that is going towards cloud migration. Worldwide, cloud will grow to a compound annual growth rate of roughly 36%, so reaching probably over $20 billion. Cloud budgets for IT organizations, doesn't matter what demographic, it ranges between 25 on the low end to $125 million for IT initiatives into the cloud. So doing the numbers, it's probably around $675,000 to $700,000 on the median, on the average cost. Today, almost 80% of businesses in the US use some type of cloud technology or migration to the cloud. By next year, 10% of overall IT security capabilities will be delivered into the cloud, and cloud infrastructure investment remains slightly on top as the main priority when it comes to cloud. So a couple of fun facts. You know, I told you no more numbers, so we're not going to do that. A couple of fun facts. Everyone knows, now it was 2 years ago last year, now it's 3 years, and 90% of the world's data, which is where big data came from, came in the last 3 years now, since it's 2014. Now the world's data doubles roughly every 2 years. So you can imagine the type of data that is processed, that is collected, that is aggregated and crunched, and the type of servers and data centers that are needed to power any of these solutions. 100 hours of video uploaded onto YouTube every minute. I thought that was a fun fact. It's something that I heard when I was at the Google offices a couple months ago. Literally making a lot of money out of there for advertising. The world's largest data center on average occupies over 1 million square feet. So to give you an idea of scope in layman's terms, you can roughly fit about 17 football fields in a single data center of that size. So pretty ginormous. Close to 6 million servers are installed every year to keep up with the data growth in online services. And one data center, in terms of power, is equivalent to about 25,000 homes that you can power up. So, I mean, big data and cloud also means a lot of resources, a lot of green initiatives when it comes to cloud computing and data centers. Data centers are synonymous with cloud computing. The more data that's being pushed, the more resources are being built for servers, and the more data centers are being built, and greater initiatives to be able to cool those facilities. So a lot of companies like Facebook, a lot of companies like Microsoft and Google are trying to figure out ways to be able not only cool their data centers in a green way so they cost less, but they're also putting their data centers in places like Iceland where the average degree temperature is like less than 5 degrees, just so they can cool the facility without spending a lot of money on AC. So it's a really big play. The most popular public cloud applications, now I bolded this because I want to make it more interactive. So this is a quiz question for you guys out there. What do you think are the 3 most popular public cloud, so SaaS applications that are used? This is kind of a trick question, so you might think of one that I thought of but wasn't actually on this list when I did my research. What do you think are the top 3? And the winner gets a North Face Dry Fit Wow Rack t-shirt, courtesy of our Director of Marketing. So the chances to win in a group like this are far greater. To win the lottery is going to be that much better. So anyone want to take a guess? I mean,
email.
Gmail? You said Gmail?
Email generally.
Okay. Anyone else want to take a guess? Let me take a couple before I give you the answer. Just
Photoshare.
Even 2. Photoshare. Okay, that's a logical response. Facebook. They have the largest Hadoop cluster, and I know because I talked to their CTO once. They do New Year's and Halloween. You can imagine because of the costumes and pictures. They do a petabyte of storage just on those days. Of photo uploads. This is ginormous to it itself. And they're the largest Hadoop company out there in the world. Good guess, but not quite. Any other one? Take another guess?
YouTube.
Sorry?
YouTube?
No, not quite. Not quite. I'll give you one more. One more guess. You got to do it because you guys tied. I mean, you guys said, but you, well, he actually was right on. He said Gmail, so that's true. Gmail's #1 SaaS solution. Okay. I'll give you another hint. It has to do with the Google product.
Drive.
Google Docs.
Docs. Wow.
Google Docs or MS Live Meeting is the 2nd most used SaaS product out there. Anyone want to take a meander or a guess on the 3rd? I probably won't guess it, but it's a collaboration tool for meetings. Cisco owns them.
WebEx?
Yes, WebEx. That gentleman over there, he wins it. This will fit you, buddy. It's a large, kind of one size fits all.
Thank you.
So yeah, those are probably the 3 most popular SaaS products out there today. You see, this stuff you'll remember. If I give you a whole bunch of numbers of billions and trillions of dollars, it goes out the ear, out the other. So this is good. About 65% of businesses agree that cloud will be an all-out reality versus just a conceptual idea. You know, so it's going to be a fact more than possible fiction. Really quick, I'm not going to bore you with cloud, defining what the cloud is because you guys probably know a lot of it already. But everyone knows about cloud. According to the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they have a very good standard base in terms of text of what cloud computing is in general. Cloud characteristics or traits. Everyone knows there's broad network access, CDN networks. You can access connectivity in anywhere in the world, anytime. You can spin up and spin down instances, rapid elasticity. It's a measured or metered service, so meaning you only pay like a utility, like electricity. So you only pay for what you use. That's the benefit of a good cloud solution, especially public cloud. On-demand, self-service, so you can don't have to worry about CapEx. You don't have to worry about buying infrastructure or renting a data center. You can just use all of Amazon's or Rackspace or Azure's resources because they have plenty, and buy those per hour. So it's resource pooling. The 3 main delivery models, and there's, I call everything as a service these days, but these are the 3 main ones: software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service, who we are, WowRack. And the different type of deployment models, which I'm going to talk about probably more in depth in terms of security, is public, private, hybridization, and community. Community is, let's say I take a certain private cloud or a certain container cloud environment and only host maybe medical companies. So the community that shares the same type of regulatory needs, that's a community cloud. So you can actually stick multiple companies that have the same protocols and security. So that's kind of a new one, what they call a community cloud, but these are the biggest three right about here. It is kind of fun. So one thing about being a company based out of Washington, I've been in hosting for over 15 years. Long time. And it's been a fun ride being in Washington State, because this company, which I'm trying to help grow, I was part of a really small ISP back over 15 years ago, and we got acquired by a larger company that also was the service provider for WowRack. And I joined WowRack about 8 years ago. But in short, being, and this is arguable depending on who you ask, being the home of probably, I would say, 2 of the top 4 largest cloud company providers, Amazon and Microsoft. I mean, Rackspace is in there too, and Google is coming up really, really big. But I'd say 2 of the top 4, it's safe to say. Amazon is clearly the giant elephant in the room. But they only focus on public cloud, and that's the area that they focus on. WowRack is more on this kind of area, although we try to mix it with both. And that's really the interesting thing, just being on panels with some of the C-level execs at Amazon or Microsoft, understanding the technologies that drive them, because it really helps WowRack as a smaller company innovate very, very quickly. Another overview of cloud. So this is a cool diagram that I thought would be neat to show you, because the other initiatives that I have seen that has been growing leaps and bounds, other than putting applications or database information on the cloud, is your desktop. Everyone's trying to virtualize their desktop. They call it VDI, desktop as a service, virtual desktop infrastructure. Everything's putting their corporate data onto the cloud and centralizing it. So you take a cloud environment, you have all your servers, your desktops, you have your different software platforms, your applications, your storage, even your BYOD initiatives, and that's another huge thing we can talk about in brief, and all your other desktop compute devices. Everyone's actually centralizing the applications because, number one, it mitigates risks, security. If you have desktops in different locations, if someone steals your local storage or your computer or your laptop, you're screwed. You have a lot of proprietary information potentially on that. But VDI is a great example of companies trying to get into the cloud and having everything reside on a single private server, for example. And it's easy because I can update at WowRack, for example, patches or updates on that particular server without having to do updates on 20 or 30 different laptops or computers. So it's a lot less mitigation in terms of security, higher mitigation for security, a lot less risk for someone's taking your proprietary information or your hardware which you own. And it's very faster to deploy per user, and it's also very scalable. And it's more into the OpEx model. So I thought that was a good slide to show. Compliancy, some of the basic things. So data concerns can be bundled into many, many different standards. You guys know HIPAA is medical records, so X-rays, hospital records, things like that, bless you. There's also, Sarbanes-Oxley, this is a common one for public companies. In short, PCI is a payment credit card interface, I believe, or industry. So that's credit card transactions, retail shops. DIACAP is Department of Defense way to host those type of federal regulated documents and data. There's also the FedRAMP initiative, and there's GLB, which really focuses more on the finance industry, so banking. So these are all types of compliances that are out there that make it even more important to migrate into the cloud, but figuring out what kind of deployment model works best for security reasons. Compliance concerns today. Is there any questions so far, by the way? I'm kind of going through this saying that I was going to give you guys time for a slide because it was such a large group. No questions, I'll keep going. But raise your hand, please. This is not a formal thing by any means.
As far as hybridization, what would you say is the biggest application in the cloud right now for hybrid models?
That's a really good question. So a lot of companies like legacy apps that require low latency, they don't tend to work well on distributed models like public cloud. So legacy apps are still good for like co-location, for example. People buy their own hardware. Legacy apps are more ERP systems or SAP systems, things like that.
Okay.
Right? That's a good one. But I think a lot of companies that are looking at, let's say, high compute and high I/O for their hardware, so they need dedicated bare metal infrastructure with high memory capacity, SSD technology, solid state drives versus regular hard drives, but to be able to deploy in the public cloud. So let's say you have a company like Cheeseburger. Okay, they do comics and UGC, user-generated content. Big company who does maybe 20 million unique visits a month. They actually have a lot of UGC content that people upload to the public cloud because it's very easy to store images. It's not proprietary. It's pictures of cats, pictures of comic books, pictures of people falling into the lake, things like that. That's good stuff to be stored in the cloud because it's very elastic. For people that want to be able to store maybe their database though, a list of customers, maybe a payment system for that service in any way, those people tend to want to mirror into a hybrid cloud, i.e. private server and the infrastructure, things like that. It's a good question. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
So top considerations when migrating to the cloud for compliance, platform integrity. So we talked about the 3 deployment models. Make sure you understand how you're securing your data. Who has access? Okay, this is the key thing because if you're jumping around public cloud solutions, as you know, there are, for example, Amazon, they have multiple regions and availability zones, but a lot of those availability zones they do not own and they're in different countries. So when you talk about different countries, you're talking about this part here too. You're talking about data sovereignty. If you host your own data, even though you're a US business in Japan or Europe or some other country, you do not have control over that data because it's in a different sovereign government behind their own walls. So those are some of the things you need to really, really consider. So who has access, even in the data centers, you got to really look in terms of the SLAs, the service level agreements, who has access to the rack. If you have a public cloud solution that's being distributed across different regions and load balance on the fly, because it's basically image from server to server, and it's almost impossible to track which servers those are residing, what your data is residing on. So it's very, very important to read the fine print of each SLA for each facility you are hosting on when it comes to, let's say, a public cloud solution. How is it stored? And again, migrating interoperability. You don't want to have the vendor lock-in is what they call it. You don't want to be stuck in one vendor. You want to have the ability to move in. Some providers have an easier time on their API to migrate your data to a different cloud. Some others do not. So that's why hybrid cloud tends to be a good fit for some companies, depending on the type of data they decide to put on into their distributed network. Infrastructure, hardware, and data centers. So the big boys are spending money on infrastructure. Like I mentioned, MS, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple probably are the largest data center builders. And part of it's funny because these people Amazon didn't plan on selling cloud services. They just had a lot of access capacity. They're a retail shop, a bookstore. Now they're the largest public cloud hosting company because they had just a heck of a lot of servers and they just wanted to be able to use it and sell it in chunks. And that's why public cloud basically came into existence. So a lot of these companies, even Facebook, they have the OpenStack initiative or Open Compute initiative where it's like open source hardware that's green, takes up less power. You know, Apple obviously has a lot of data centers, and Google because they're the largest search engine out there. So all these companies are trying to find ways to be able to build their infrastructure but save money with big data and cloud distributed models. Here's one question: if these major companies are fueling the consumption of large amounts of data, DC growth and power, who's fueling them? So who thinks they can take a guess on that question? If these major companies are fueling the consumption of all this large amounts of data growth, power, consumption, electricity, who do you think is fueling them to be able to do that on their end? Kind of a trick question, but if you think about it, it's kind of an obvious one. All right, there's another prize. Unfortunately, it's not a dry fit shirt, but it is a screen cleaner for your phone. This is great for GPS on your. I put it next to my oiled sticker in my car. Okay, ingenious, right? So I use it to clean my GPS or to clean my monitor for my laptop. Works. But anyone wants to take a guess? Even a close guess? Come on, it's a freebie. Who do you think is fueling all of this stuff? The consumption of all this energy and big data and growth. Okay. Well, you are, right? It's kind of an obvious thing. We are the ones. The consumers are fueling this growth of big data, right? So, is that too small? I hope you guys can read. Each second in the cloud, obviously, more information is being collected, shared, and stored, right? We'll give you guys all a freebie. So more purchases are being made, okay, online, right? Those people and all of our parents and grandparents who said, I'll never do stuff online and purchase things, those people are eating their words now. My mom would never say, she never was going to use email. Now she forwards things so much to me, I can't even keep up with the emails. I don't even open up half of them. But basically, these people are learning that it's more convenient to buy things online, right? So security is going to be a major force behind that. More servers are being provisioned or built, obviously with big data, data center growth, and more energy, like I said, is being used. So what does that equal? All these additions equals an increase in data loss, right? The more data you have out there, the more potential people have an avenue to steal it, right? We all know that. More risk for outages. No matter which data center you are, Amazon, small, big, medium, large, every data center has had some power issues in some history if they've been around for over 10 years. There's more security risks fraudulent activity. We all know that there's all type of malware out there. You know, the recent ones now are, to me, like there's malware, everything as a service these days, but there's the one ransomware that I read about where people are actually hijacking your systems and charging you, if you want access to your systems, you gotta pay me $1,000 in the next 5 minutes or I'm deleting your data. So basically hijacking, like in the movies where a big skull comes up on your screen and says you need to enter the access code, that's what they're doing. So a lot of different risks out there. And that also is because of mobile devices, right? The more devices you have, the more risk for access and theft. Power consumption and hardware failures. It's just economics. So what does that result in? It results in an increased importance when it comes to updating your business strategy towards cloud deployments and backup planning. So why private cloud? You know, and the reason why I just touch on private cloud is because a lot of people understand what public cloud is good for. It's the least barrier to entry. It's the cheapest thing to do on the cloud initially. But some people are still curious about private cloud. So real quick, private clouds can provide a solution for highly compliant data security and privacy. A little bit what I alluded to earlier, it's partly because of the single tenant setup of these clouds. Nothing is hosted, meaning shared in cyberspace. Everything, including the load balancers, the switches, even the firewalls, are not virtualized. They're just dedicated bare metal appliances for one particular business or consumer. Another benefit of that is knowing where your server is and your data is at all times. You know where it's running. You can actually see here and touch it because it's in a local place in Seattle, or it's in Mountain View in California, or it's in Japan if you live in Japan. So that also gives some assurance of people that house their data in data centers because they actually see here and touch their data. They know it's not being bounced around to different regions on the fly without even knowing where they are. So it's more customized control of infrastructure. It allows you to spec out your infrastructure the way that you want it in a lot more controlled fashion. It does eliminate jurisdictional concerns of laws outside the US. Like I mentioned, if you have a public cloud solution, doesn't matter who you use for a CSP, there are data sovereignty laws that you have to really, really be sensitive to and adhere to and read in the fine print, because those laws will affect your businesses astronomically if you're not careful. Dedicated hardware running virtualized instances without multi-tenancy. Public cloud is getting better at this, but you know, with private cloud, for better memory and for better I/O, IOPS, and server speeds, SSDs tend to be a better fit because they also have a less failure rate and a higher run rate versus standard hard drives. So when you have a private cloud environment, you can actually customize it to your needs. And the economies of scale, contrary to what people might tell you, public cloud is better and cheaper initially. But as soon as your bandwidth, and depending on your business applications, are running on the public cloud and you're using just a heck of a lot of bandwidth in and out, your economies of scale shift astronomically. There are companies that we work with that literally did a hybrid model with us because some of their AWS instances were running $500,000 a month on hosting bills, right? And so they actually deployed it into a private cloud solution, private, better compute power, about 6 times greater compute power, and we were able to save them 50% off of their bill. So it's pretty big savings depending on what kind of data that you guys use. So cloud security issues, private cloud deployment considerations. If you are looking at doing a hybrid of public and private or just private itself, make sure it's well architected. Make sure you have contingencies to evolve into a public or hybrid cloud. For example, some companies are using what they call an elastic transport service. So there's Time Warner is doing something with us currently that allows our clients to still keep stuff on AWS, but they want to have stuff running in one of our data centers around the world, and we're able to use their transport or transit line metered. So you basically pay for the bandwidth you use with your setup costs. So it's very similar to compute on demand meter, but it's just bandwidth on demand in transport. So you actually have a physical line from the cloud AWS to a data center private cloud infrastructure, and you can actually marry the two to a true hybridization. So that's an idea for those of you who are wondering. Make sure to be aware of vulnerabilities, obviously hypervisors and virtualization software. Make sure you keep up with the patches. Managed services providers can bring value because their job is to manage the entire stack and move everything from a CapEx to an OpEx model. Ensure you safeguard data within your organization. So have mitigation plans for virtual desktop infrastructure, BYOD and MDM initiatives, and even DDoS mitigation plans. You know, there's a lot of DDoS attacks out there, denial of service attacks. A lot of companies, no matter who they are, deal with it on a day-by-day basis, so make sure you have a solid plan in place. Restrict access to your own corporate network. A lot of people are worried about theft or fraudulent activity coming from outside the firewall. A lot of stuff also happens inside. There's a lot of people hijacking systems, or maybe past employees that have bad blood with the bosses or the company itself that are trying to hijack the systems. Make sure you have sysadmins that restrict access and implement proper controls to your network, your shared files, folders, etc. And on the physical side, try to separate your architecture to HA, which is highly available. So instead of having one web server and one database server and one firewall, have pairs. So one goes down, obviously the other one is there to pick up the slack. I'm not going to go too much into this, but this is kind of an example of an HA diagram that I drew. And it's highly availability. So you have the internet or the cloud, and then you have everything behind the firewall. Instead of one, you have two. So you have two pairs running just for DR planning. And then you have dual network load balancers. You could do F5 on the high end. You could do Coyote Point on the lower end. You can have like some Cisco switches here, Force 10 switches, and everything is run in a virtualized environment, running database, application, and different types of workload environments. So make sure you try to plan your architecture accordingly, depending on what your data is. If budget's a concern, have single availability, just one, depending on that data, and then put everything else towards a certain environment that houses like your medical records or your credit card numbers, things like that, in a completely separate environment that is a lot more secure. So public cloud, everyone knows about, so I'm not going to go into the details about it, but some of the security concerns and what you can do about it to safeguard yourself in terms of deployment models with public is to make sure you assess your cloud service provider. So these are basic, obvious things. Before you're going out and meeting some person, your wife or your girlfriend, you got to assess who you're going to date. You got to figure out if this is the person you want to be with. You're going to do your homework, do a Google search, talk to their friends or your friends, figure out who this person is. Same thing with your cloud service provider. You're putting your lifeblood, your data, your money, your clients, your patients, all into this data center. You better know how they're actually housing that data on a day-by-day basis. So again, make sure you look at the service level agreements. Okay, make sure they have certain uptime. Make sure they have uptime of minimum of 4 nines, so 99.9999 as a minimum standard. Make sure, because data centers do go down, make sure you do have in the fine print written out and signed credits that properly reflect damages and outages incurred. A lot of businesses face some irreparable damages and cost loss based on outages that range from even a minute to a couple hours. So make sure you have those contracts in place that clearly states how much you're going to get back as a credit if, in fact, your data is down. Twitter was just down recently. You were just mentioning it to me when we were trying to do a tweet. So it happens, okay? Third parties involved, third parties are great, but sometimes it's better to go directly to the source. One, because of cost, because they have to build in their margins that they're going through other providers. But also, it's hard to communicate with so many different companies because everything tends to get lost in translation, right? So try to mitigate going through third-party vendors. Try to go direct to the source if you can. Data center compliance is met, again. So do they have dual controls, N+1 power, battery generator backup? Do they have cooling redundancies in place? Do they have separate lines to the to your grid, your state grid for dual lines? If one grid fails, then you have dual power coming in from another separate grid. Make sure that they have dual controls for authenticating into your data center. We have biometric and finger, so they have to match the card with the finger. So if someone steals the card, it doesn't do any good unless, God forbid, they steal your finger. But so make sure you have those type of compliances in place and safeguard that. Countries' data is accessed, stored, and processed. Each location needs to adhere to specific standards based on your business and data requirements. So what can you do as a consumer and as a business? Cryptography is an obvious one. Everyone knows cryptography is the science of security measures. How can I secure my environment, whether it be cloud-based, network, architecturally, corporate, or otherwise? Data encryption keys are part of that, right? You want to be able to give encryption keys for people that actually have authorization to receive that data and to decrypt that data so they can actually access it. Make sure you have proper auditing processes and policies in place internally. Double check your work, right? Have good monitoring and logs. And use common sense. Be smart on how you store your data. The longer you store data into the cloud, the more likelihood it's going to be possibly stolen, hacked, right? If you keep things out there, if I keep my laptop here for a minute versus half an hour, the likelihood of someone stealing my laptop versus 29 minutes is huge, right? So make sure you just use common sense when you store your data, how long. And have a backup strategy in place. So which cloud is better? Again, there's no answer to that. There is no one cloud that's better than the other. If you're talking strictly public or private cloud, it just really depends on the security needs that you have personally or for your business, the type of data that your clients are serving or storing in your network, even the clients that you have in different countries. Okay, so if you're looking to be able to have low ping times and get customers to access your SaaS solution in different countries, then public cloud is probably a better fit than a localized area that's clear across the continent. So you want to make sure you have distributed networks and architect your compute accordingly. So gathering all the facts, hybrid tends to be the biggest approach. So forecasts and predictions. So my personal take, this is the last slide, so we're almost done. So my personal take, hybridization will fast become the most widely used cloud-hosted model for businesses. It's kind of an obvious one, but it's going to happen a lot quicker than some might think. There are going to be more M&As, so more mergers and acquisitions. If you can't beat them, join them. You know, obviously, CenturyLink bought out Tier 3, IBM bought out SoftLayer. You know, even Amazon might buy out Eucalyptus, which is probably the third on the totem pole in terms of open source cloud operating system solutions out there, next to OpenStack and CloudStack. So acquisitions are going to happen. I see an increase in DevOps. So DevOps is really the blend of app developers and system ops teams. I see this as a huge growing segment. These teams tend to work separately, but I see a more symbiotic relationship in the coming months, let alone years, with the two teams. And we could go on all day with just that topic alone. Our ERP and corporate data will continue to migrate to the cloud. A lot of people are going to be more comfortable putting data into the cloud as soon as they understand how to deploy it safely. Cloud pricing will continue to drop. Amazon does it like by the day, and when Amazon does it, everyone else behind them has to do the same thing. And BYOD and MDM devices and initiatives. So bring your own devices, and mobile device management is going to be a key player. With cloud development and deployment, everyone is being able to access data anywhere, anytime, any place. The average American in the US probably has about 3 smart devices. Cell phones number 1, laptops number 2. I actually read an interesting stat. The average American has about 2.9 devices per person, and Germany is the number 1 with like maybe 3.1 and 3.2. So they're ahead of the game in terms of that regard. But the point is, make sure you have, as a corporation, a plan in place for people using their own devices and accessing certain software as a solution companies or applications. If people are storing things on Dropbox versus a more corporate data set, make sure you have plans to be able to safeguard your network. And increasing types of malware, we talked about that. And spending, and more spending. You know, cloud is not going to stop. It's just going to continue to grow. In my take, it's just going to continue to grow enormously, more than we ever thought, with data doubling, every 2 years alone. So it's not kind of like the Star Trek analogy. Resistance is futile, I guess, if you were to use a metaphor. It's coming. So every business organization has got to figure out how to be able to implement it on a business scale. But as consumers, it's equally important for you guys to understand what cloud solutions are out there and what you guys are using on a consumer plate. That's it. This is my contact information. I'm happy to send this slide deck out. I'm happy to answer any questions here or afterwards. I think we'll be here a bit for the networking event and the post party. We do have a couple screen cleaners, so Chow will be just spreading that love around a little bit just because there's so many of you guys. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it. Any questions? Good. All right. Thank you guys. 37 minutes, almost right on time.
Anyone on screener?